So, hello and welcome to another episode of the ICC Academy COVID-19 Briefing, an interactive video series where we explore the economic and health implications of the coronavirus pandemic and what must be done to ensure successful recovery for businesses big and small. I'm your host, Thomas Paris, and in this episode, we will explore examples of misleading health claims and financial get-rich-quick ads that have increased over the past few months. Joining us today is Sheila Millar, Vice Chair of the ICC Commission on Marketing and Advertising and partner at Keller and Heckman, Sibylle Stanciu-Loeckx, Manager at the International Council for Advertising Self-Regulation, Lucas Boudet, Director General at the European Advertising Standards Alliance, and our moderator as well is Raelene Martin, Knowledge Manager at the ICC Commission on Marketing and Advertising. So during this session, we will start by running through a few pre-prepared topics, followed by an audience Q&A at the end. So we invite you to send your questions in the chat and we'll go through them together. So let's kick things off. Ray, over to you.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you to all of you who've joined us from all over the world. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. We're so pleased you could join us for this exciting webinar that we'll be discussing on misleading claims. So first, to start off with, it's clear that we've all become increasingly aware of the degree of impact of the COVID crisis on every spectrum of our lives, as well as the global economy at large. We've noticed that the global economy, apart from the tragic loss of lives over the world, we've noticed the significant impact on the economy due to reduced economic activity as well as loss of jobs. But we've also seen increased anxiety as people try to grapple with the effects of this crisis. One important thing is that businesses have a role to play in these difficult times. And we've seen many businesses take proactive action to curb the spread of the virus, but also helping to support governments in disseminating information as well as creating awareness about coronavirus more broadly, particularly through public service ads. However, on the other hand, we've also seen an increase in ads that either seek to treat, reduce the impact of, or prevent the virus, as well as many get-rich-quick ads that have been in the market quite recently, and that can undermine consumer confidence as well as public health advice. So our distinguished speakers today will be taking a closer look at this issue and examining what these issues mean in practice and how we can ensure that businesses can and should advertise responsibly in the context of this coronavirus crisis. So without further ado, I would like to take you very briefly through the ICC Marketing Code, from which we can draw guidance, particularly in the context of this COVID era. And then I will hand over to our speakers. So, Thomas, if you don't mind, I'll just go through very quickly our slides presenting the ICC Code. So the ICC Code has been in existence for over 80 years, since 1937. As such, it's known as the global reference for international best practice, and it also serves as the foundation and building block for self-regulatory structures around the world. The ICC Code provides ethical guidance on responsible advertising and marketing communications, particularly in this area. And we feel that right now in the area of COVID-19, the ICC guidance is particularly relevant as it provides guidance on social responsibility. An example is that the code states all marketing communications should be legal, decent, honest, and truthful. And the additional guidance on social responsibility would be very useful to consider in this respect. So we look forward to hearing how the ICC Code can be used as a guide more internationally, particularly in the context of these claims. The next slide that I'm showing is a visual representation of ICC Code use around the world. And it demonstrates how national codes and self-regulation are based on the ICC Code internationally. As you'll see from the map, we have strong representation in many regions around the world, including Europe, Latin America, Canada, Australia, parts of Africa. And currently, we have 52 countries that have advertising self-regulation, and 42 of those countries that have or are developing national codes based on the ICC Code. Before I move over to our speakers, and especially as we have this webinar being hosted by the ICC Academy, I would like to highlight that we have a free online course on ethical marketing and advertising that takes a closer look at the ICC Code principles and how those can be implemented in practice. So please feel free to visit the course online and take it at your earliest convenience, and I'm sure there'll be lots for you to learn. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our speakers, particularly Lucas and Sibylle, to take us through the advertising self-regulatory system and to demonstrate how we can protect consumers as well as ensure businesses advertise responsibly. So just to reiterate, Lucas Boudet is the Director General of the European Advertising Standards Alliance, representing all components of the ad ecosystem, advertisers, agencies, and the media, as well as 27 self-regulatory organizations across Europe. And Sibylle was recently appointed as the Association Manager at the International Council for Advertising Self-Regulation. She's also worked for more than 12 years in the field of advertising and advertising self-regulation, firstly at EASA and then at ICAS, the European Association of Communication Agencies. So over to you, Lucas and Sibylle, if you could take us through your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. So indeed, Raelene Martin presented the ICC Code and the national advertising codes, which are based on the ICC Code. These ad standards are a great asset in ensuring responsible advertising, but they're even more powerful and credible if they are independently enforced. So this is why the representatives of the local ad industry, this is to say the advertisers, the agencies, media, TV, radio, press, outdoor, online, they came together to set up what we call self-regulatory organizations. And there are over 50 of those self-regulatory organizations across the globe. And what they do, they ensure the proper implementation of national advertising codes and also the ICC Code. They are part of the wider advertising self-regulatory system, which is actually good for businesses, consumers, and policymakers. But here we'll focus on how advertising self-regulation actually protects consumers and how does it work. So first of all, it ensures robust advertising standards. Every SRO brings together all of the components of the ad ecosystem. They come together to create, set up, and abide by high standards of responsible advertising. And this is done through an open process, a consultation process where all of the relevant stakeholders are involved. But beyond these rules, then is to check compliance. There are many mechanisms in place to ensure this compliance even before the ad is featured and that the consumers can see it and complain. And one of the elements we'll see more later, it's own initiative monitoring. So the SROs check ads and verify if they're compliant or not, and ask these ads to be taken down if they are found to be non-compliant with the codes. Of course, as a last resort, consumers can also file complaints. And in most of the countries, there are independent juries that can actually adjudicate on those complaints. And this is an important feature in the system. And this works across borders, which means that no matter where the consumer is, if there is a SRO in that country, he or she can file a complaint, no matter where the ad stems from. So there's a big coverage of self-regulation across the globe. And I think a last interesting feature of ad self-regulation is the fact that it addresses societal changes. So first, geographically, this is why the codes are national, because it's not only about what's legal, illegal, it's also what's acceptable, not acceptable, which means that what is acceptable, for instance, in Finland might not be acceptable in Spain. And this goes across time as well. What has been acceptable 20 years ago might not be today. And with COVID-19, same thing. What was acceptable 2 months ago with the current context might not be. And now I'd like to leave the stage to Sibylle Stanciu-Loeckx, who will deep dive a bit on how our system addresses the issues of COVID-19.
Thank you, Lucas. So we want to look today at what our members have been doing when they were suddenly faced with this crisis and misleading ads that were really popping up across the globe. So first of all, let's look at the complaints. So we've asked our members how many complaints they actually received related to ads that were linked to COVID-19. And in the period between mid-March to mid-May, they reported more than 1,600 complaints about ads related to COVID-19. But there are also SROs that can deal with advertisements on their own initiative if they find that they are misleading. And here you can see that more than 410 ads in that period had been investigated by our members on their own initiative. But they've even gone further than that. So not only have SROs adapted quickly to deal with these ads that suddenly try to mislead or were responsible in some way, the SROs also facilitated, in some cases, the complaint handling. And actually more than half of them have even fast-tracked harmful COVID-19 complaints. So we think that the system is already really quick, so much quicker than a legal system would often be. And now with regard to COVID-19 and kind of a certain sense of emergency, they've even tried to speed up the process even more so that complaints can be dealt with within really days. Here are just two examples of ways to complain. The EASA in the UK, for example, has a new report form for coronavirus ads, which makes it easier for consumers to really quickly lodge a complaint. They don't need to give that much information and data, and then the complaint is fast-tracked. And another thing which is really interesting is from our Indian member. In India, consumers, for example, can complain by simply using WhatsApp. And it's really as easy as just chatting with a friend. Now, obviously, a lot of the advertisements complained about were about misleading claims, such as misleading health claims, issues on availability of products, financial claims, excessive pricing, and so on. And I want to show you a few examples. So this is a complaint that was actually done by a consumer organization. It was made to the Spanish SRO Autocontrol, and it was a video that was shared on WhatsApp, and it was promoting wine as actually something that is protecting you against the virus, coronavirus, as well as against other illnesses. And you can see there's even a mention of cancer. The SRO took action. The advertiser agreed that this ad was not okay, and the ad was taken down. Another example from India is an advertiser that promoted the mattress as an anti-coronavirus mattress. Again, the advertiser agreed that this was going too far. The ad was taken down.
So, yes, another example here coming from Greece. So unlike the others where it was a complaint, it's actually here our own initiative monitoring where the SO identified as ad as being non-compliant. So let's play the video and have a look at it.
Κάθε πρωί το ίδιο. Πλήθος παντού. Εκατομμύρια ή και βακτήρια παντού. Δεν θέλω να αρρωστήσω. Τι πρέπει να κάνω? Το Medistus Antivirus σχηματίζει ένα προστατευτικό φιλμ μέσα στη στοματική κοιλότητα, προσφέροντας φυσική προστασία σε περίπτωση αυξημένου κινδύνου μόλυνσης ενάντια σε εκατομμύρια ιούς και βακτήρια. Medistus Antivirus. Αποτελεσματική προστασία από ασθένειες του αναπνευστικού. Σχετικά με τους κινδύνους, διαβάστε τις οδηγίες χρήσης ή συμβουλευτείτε τον γιατρό σας.
So for those who don't speak Greek, I'd just like to focus on two specific claims that were made in the voiceover. One of them is actually, I'm going to read it, it's Medistus Antivirus forms a protective film in the oral cavity, offering natural protection in the event of an increased risk of infection. So first question here, is this claim actually substantiated? But the local SRO focused on another element of the advertisement is this claim. Every morning, the same issue, crowds everywhere, millions of viruses and bacteria everywhere. I don't want to get sick, what should I do? And I think here it raises another issue that we'll be discussing, social responsibility. The SO considered that the text and also the visuals conveyed a message of fear and despair and actually exploited the widespread anxiety and fear that we are seeing now in the COVID-19 times. So even actually in regular times, the SRO would still have considered this ad as being excessive. They contacted the advertiser, and the advertiser then took down the advertisement. This brings us to social responsibility, because in the complaints, we've also seen issues of irresponsible behavior, fear-mongering, and also issues of social decency. So another advertisement quickly, this one from Finland. It's an advertisement for financial services for a bank. So for those who don't speak Finnish, it's written on top, is it the end of the world? Is it the end of time? So here again, it's been considered irresponsible to use the picture of a kid and to generate fear and panic, which is totally not suitable in the current times. So of course, the advertisement, the complaint was upheld. And another one coming from France. So this one was just released. It's an advertisement for a discotheque just before the lockdown. So I don't know actually if Corona, the brand itself, was happy with such an advertisement. But here again, it shows how brands take advantage of the current situation in, I would say, a non-proper manner to promote the products or services.
So now I also want to show you a different example that is not about misleadingness, but that actually shows how consumer perceptions are changing and how then advertisers should reflect these changes in society, and the SROs can help do that. So some behaviors which were considered perfectly okay before the pandemic now are not advisable, such as social gatherings or others. And I just want to show you an ad. It's a Dorito ad from South Africa, which was considered perfectly fine before, but was considered maybe not appropriate in these times. So it's just half a minute.
Hey, are you gonna finish those? Sorry, they're already gone. No, they're not. You left the best part. No, I'm pretty sure they're... cheese. I love Doritos. Doritos!
Doritos for the bold.
So I think it's a funny ad. It's a great ad, but yeah, the advertiser agreed that maybe it was not really appropriate in these times. So now let's come to the fact that SROs, they do a lot to protect consumers, but they do also a lot to support businesses. And one of the things they're doing, Lucas already mentioned, they provide training and raise awareness about codes of conduct. And they also provide really specific advice and also copy advice. I think Lucas mentioned it also for advertisements that are prepared by advertisers or by the agencies. And then the SRO would give advice on the compliance of this specific ad before it is published or broadcast, which really brings another level of protection for both the business and the consumers. And like this, they ensure a level playing field, because if advertising is responsible, it also protects the other businesses, and everyone plays fair. It's good for everyone. And finally, of course, a responsible ad is protecting the brand's reputation, because if you advertise responsibly, consumers really appreciate that, and it protects the reputation of brand. I'm really sorry for my kids barging in. So just to give you a few concrete examples of advice that is available for the industry with regard to COVID-19. So this is a website you see from New Zealand, where the SRO provides specific ad help with regard to COVID-19. We have examples from Australia, from Canada, as well as from France and many other SROs. So if you want to look what the SROs are doing, and if you need specific advice on COVID-19, please do and go and check the website of the SROs. But a lot of this advice goes out through other social media channels. And as I said, there is also specific advice for specific ads if you need copy advice or ad help, as it's called in New Zealand. So thank you a lot. And then we'll be, of course, available for questions in a minute. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to Lucas and Sibylle for this very insightful presentation. Before I hand over to Sheila, could I ask perhaps, Lucas, if you could share what you would say the role of the ICC Marketing Code is at this particular time, and particularly in the context of the self-regulatory network?
So first of all, it's a code that's been here for over 8 years. The principles are really the cornerstone that are applicable in any kind of situation. Advertising should be legal, decent, honest, and truthful, and this remains the case today. And I think the SROs are there to draw the bridge, to create the bridge between specific cases in COVID-19 related situations and these rules that still apply, and they're there to make sure that they are being followed by marketers. So I think it's straight to the point. I think the code is extremely important in ensuring responsible advertising, especially nowadays.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Sheila Millar, who is a partner at Keller and Heckman in the US, where she represents businesses and trade associations on a variety of public policy and regulatory issues, including privacy, data security, cybersecurity, and advertising matters, as well as product safety issues. Sheila is also a vice chair of the ICC Commission on Marketing and Advertising and chair of ICC's work on sustainability. So Sheila, I'd like to ask you, we've heard about the advertising self-regulatory system and how that works in practice to promote consumers against misleading claims related to the health and economic crisis. Could you share with us the state of play in the US and how these types of ads are being addressed, and more particularly what some of the responses are from regulators in this respect?
Sure. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. I'm so delighted to be joining Ray and Sibylle and Lucas on this important issue. There is an interesting interplay when it comes to COVID claims that I want to speak to, and that's because we're talking about claims often that purport to allow for a cure or treatment of the disease itself, which is a drug claim or a medical device claim. And then there are claims related to the ability to control bacteria, viruses on things, which really implicates pesticide and regulatory regimes. So I think from the outset, there's a divide between the ethical marketer who follows the kinds of procedures that Lucas and Sibylle went over. They do adopt procedures to adhere to guidelines. They do understand the very complex regulatory requirements. They substantiate their claims. They don't prey on vulnerable consumers. They look at in-market claims based on new circumstances and revise them accordingly. And then there are mechanisms to respond to misinformation in the marketplace. So let me turn to maybe the larger question of the limits of advertising codes and self-regulation. We're all very staunch supporters of advertising self-regulation. It's an incredibly useful and effective system. They do allow for ethical marketers to follow and understand what's good and bad about advertising and to do the right thing. But there are limits. And what self-regulation is not intended to do is to deal with rogue traders. So I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the regulatory framework, what the regulatory role is in the US. So we're not very different from other countries in the world where we have a variety of regulatory bodies. We happen to have pretty strong regulatory enforcement in some areas. So our Federal Trade Commission is responsible for misleading and deceptive claims. The FDA enforces against unapproved new human and animal drug or device claims. That means anything that's inside or on the body, anything intended to cure or treat a disease or condition is under FDA's purview. And that includes dietary supplements. I'll talk about that in a minute. Our Environmental Protection Agency enforces against pesticide claims. So again, outside the body on surfaces, things, or in the environment. Our Department of Justice enforces against fraud, which comes into play with some of the scams that we've seen targeting vulnerable consumers, either for get-rich-quick schemes or for donations to false charities that purport to be directed to protect either people harmed by COVID or to support research into COVID. And then in the US, we have a federal system, so states have authority. State attorneys generals enforce state laws, which can include their false advertising and state pesticide registration laws. So in the US, the activity that I want to highlight today is the regulatory action. The self-regulatory bodies are hearing complaints. They are evaluating these issues, but our regulatory bodies have been especially active in taking action in the form of what's known as warning letters to address issues where companies are selling fraudulent or making fraudulent claims in connection with selling COVID products. In one case, the Federal Trade Commission actually filed a court action to stop it. And so as Sibylle mentioned earlier, typically the value of self-regulation is that it can operate much, much more quickly than the legal system. In this particular case, because of concerns about harm to consumers, the regulatory agencies have actually acted fairly quickly. So on the Environmental Protection Agency side, our EPA has warned Facebook and other e-commerce platforms that the platforms are being used to sell disinfectants that fraudulently claim to fight the coronavirus. We've certainly seen evidence of false claims coming in internationally, both from clients who are seeking advice about whether or not they comply, but more specifically, companies, our clients are looking to buy products and services, and we're evaluating claims for them. That's an issue that never gets to the self-regulatory body, but is an example of what ethical companies do to make sure that they're not improperly relying on claims that can't be supported. The Department of Justice has alerted the U.S. attorneys about fraudulent coronavirus claims, including phishing, malware, donation requests. So, and at the state attorney general level, there have been actual cease and desist orders leveled against a number of companies that are making false COVID claims, including companies that make air purifiers, filters, and other types of products. One marked issue with coronavirus is that it is actually not known to be associated with contamination in water. But certainly we've seen claims, in one of the FTC's warning letters targeted a company that was making claims about water filters protecting against COVID, which is technically not possible. So we do see a lot of action there. Sibylle mentioned, and Lucas mentioned, what the SROs are doing to help provide guidance. Because these are heavily regulated areas, there has also been regulatory relief to allow companies to produce responsibly. So on the FDA side, there's what's known as an emergency use authorization to allow companies to make face masks. Certainly, we've seen a critical shortage around the world of face masks, but there are specific conditions that companies have to meet. So any company that wants to make a claim that using a face mask will cure, treat, or prevent COVID is making a false claim. The EPA is expediting its review of requests under its what's called its Emerging Viral Pathogens Guidance for antimicrobial pesticides. So the interesting issue there is there are actually viruses that are technically harder to kill than COVID. And so if you are regulated in an area where your disinfectant or your product will be effective and is approved to kill those harder to kill viruses, which include rotavirus and norovirus, it will be effective against COVID. And what EPA has said is that businesses who qualify, they can't put it on a label, but they can make certain off-label claims about effectiveness. And again, all of this is designed to get more products into the marketplace in a safe and effective way. So that's just my short overview. I think the other element that is important here is the role of associations, because we've certainly seen evidence of misinformation. One good example is that microwaves, put your face mask or put something in the microwave and it will kill the virus. There's absolutely no proof of that. And the major trade association for the appliance industry in the US has responded. So I think when we look holistically at the issue of ethical marketing, we look at it from make responsible claims. What is the role of SROs? What is the role of government? How do governments play a role in helping to get more of needed products into the market? And then how do we look at claims, as Sibylle mentioned? We've certainly had clients have us take a look at claims. Any ad that's on the air that shows a big crowd gathering, it's really not appropriate in today's environment. So that's a little bit of a view from the US, but because regulations apply in these two spaces, medical products, medical devices, drugs, and pesticides, we see similar approaches in other jurisdictions around the world.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheila. That was very, very helpful, getting some insight from the US. We do know that building consumer trust is really essential in the marketing sphere. But would you say that the increase in these types of ads have actually strengthened the argument for increased regulation? Or would you say that the self-regulatory system actually is well placed to address these in a timely and efficient manner and could help prevent future occurrences?
I think what we see is that the combination works, right? So we have a very robust system of regulation, and businesses and consumers can leverage both. What we do see is the types of businesses that the Federal Trade Commission, the New York Attorney General are going against are virtually none of them are major companies. These are much smaller players. Some of them, for example, there was a company that was making claims that their cannabidiol oil, CBD oil, could cure cancer, cure COVID. I mean, completely false and misleading claims. And that was the case that the FTC brought an enforcement action in court to stop those claims. And so I think there are certain claims where it's appropriate for governments to step in. The ethical marketers will seek legal advice. They will get copy advice where it's available around the world, and they will look to make sure that they build that trust with consumers.
Great, thank you. I think I'll address the next question to Lucas and to Sibylle. There has been a significant increase in the level of unemployment as a result of the pandemic. And this also renders the unemployed especially susceptible to many of these get-rich-quick schemes that are being advertised. What would be your advice to those who are faced with these rather tempting offers? Or what steps could consumers take if they come across any of these earning claims ads or misleading health claims that seem rather questionable?
So as we talked about...
Lucas, I think you're muted.
Am I? No, am I?
There you go.
No.
Yeah, you are. You're good now.
Okay, I'm just muting them. So.
Okay.
So obviously, when consumers see an ad they find misleading, they can go to the SRO and complain. And as Sheila mentioned, they have several ways to go and complain. SROs will take action. And if it's a big fraud, part of a scheme, the SRO might often transfer the complaint to the authorities because persecuting rogue traders, there is a limit to what SROs can do. So they would deal with the complaint, but often these kind of advertisers are really responsible, and then the next step would be the authorities. And there is actually really a big network of, you have the SROs that provide self-regulation, there is the law, there are also consumer association, and then there are also associations like ISPEN where the consumer authorities are together, and they have a platform called econsumer.gov where, again, consumers could declare if they have been frauded or if there's been illegal activities going on. So there are all these kind of elements that protect consumers from misleading and even often illegal advertisements.
So I'll just maybe add, indeed, it's that, and as Sheila said, it's these two means, these self-regulatory and regulatory, and the two work hand in hand. It's not one against each other. Both can be leveraged. And the self-regulatory organizations, for instance, don't handle, are not designed to handle rogue traders, for example. But what's important here is that there are collaborations that are ongoing today. What's important is not the rules, it's also the enforcement, and any system has its limits in enforcing, even the consumer protection authorities. So this is why in European level, our network collaborates with the CPC network, which is the network of consumer protection authorities, to find solutions together.
Perfect. Thank you, Lucas and Sibylle. I guess that was actually going to be my next question. We had heard from Sheila in terms of the response from regulators in the US, and I wondered if we have situations of other regulators that are taking similar actions and cracking down on companies that make some of these misleading and unsubstantiated claims. It's great to hear about the collaboration in the self-regulatory system to make sure that we have a well-cohesive system that protects consumers. Are there any other thoughts you would like to add to that?
So indeed, there are collaborations between also SROs and the authorities. So you have authorities at national level that deal with these kind of issues. Take, for example, Canada, where you would have, in this instance, when it comes to COVID-19 Health Canada, which would take care of these kind of cases to investigate. In the United Arab Emirates, it's a Dubai Consumer Protection Department, for example. In India, it's a Ministry of Ayush that works together with ASCI, with our member there. So where you have countries where the system works kind of hand in hand, actually consumers are really best protected.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I'm going to move on to the next question, and it's clear that ethical marketers do want to do what's right by consumers, and we've also seen situations where some businesses, as Sheila mentioned earlier, are taking advantage of the COVID situation to overstate the qualities of their products as being particularly useful in the face of the health crisis, such as killing bacteria, etc. Would you have any examples, or could you tell us a bit more about this and what the responses are in terms of misinformation in the marketplace?
Maybe I'll start with that. So there's a difference between bacteria and viruses, right? So we do see claims that something will kill bacteria, which may be truthful, but if they convey, or if you add viruses, it may in fact be both it's a false claim, and it may also be a regulatory violation. So I think when we're talking about these types of claims, the technical basis for the claim and the ability to understand that, whether it's at the advertiser level, with the outside counsel, with SROs, or with the regulators, is really central. And so it's really critically important that you understand the technical differences. If I have a water filter which is effective against certain bacteria, cysts, etc., it's effective for that. It is not going to be effective against viruses. And so I think what we find, the ethical marketer asks, like, here's our data, what can we claim? And the unethical marketer just slaps the claim on and tries to sell the product. And so I think that line between who's unethical or at a minimum careless and potentially attempting to defraud consumers versus the advertiser who's trying to, not that it's inappropriate to take advantage of the marketplace, but to do so in a way that is based on substantiation. That's the difference.
There's a thin red line to which the marketing is also to play with to some extent. So indeed, there's those who just go ahead, and the others, responsible ones, will seek advice to exactly know where do they stand. And I think also consumer perception, self-regulatory organizations also know or take into account how it will be perceived by the consumer as well. And that's something that's important. Claims can be substantiated or not, but in some other issues, it's sort of gray. And I think the expertise of trying to navigate in that gray zone is something that the SROs have.
Thank you, Lucas. And maybe I could just add to that. Do you have any thoughts or additional advice for businesses to ensure that they do advertise responsibly, particularly at this time? I know, as we've had some examples of ads that were acceptable before the crisis, but are not particularly acceptable now. Do you have some advice as to how businesses can make sure they're following the right steps?
Seek advice, contact your local SRO. I think that would be number one. Even in doubt, and if you have a doubt, any hesitation, check it with the experts. That would be my number one advice.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe on a more positive note, Lucas or Sibylle, could you tell us what businesses are doing proactively to help deal with the crisis?
Yes, so most marketers want to do what's right, but as you also said, and most advertisements are also really okay. So it's not now a question of questioning everything we're seeing, because most claims are correct. If you look at complaints figures and the complaints that go to the SROs, not all of them are upheld. It depends on the country and on the issue, but a majority of them often is not upheld. So a lot of the claims out there are also correct because the advertisers has the substantiation. And now coming to the pandemic and the issues surrounding it. So indeed, the advertising business is heavily impacted, and a lot of advertisers also are postponing their marketing budget and their campaigns. But we've seen also a lot of examples where actually advertisers are very proactive, and they use actually this time to help the governments in getting the right message out. So informing consumers about the right hygiene, about the right measures. And there are a lot of examples of supporting even with the right products. As I think you've all heard about alcohol producers who suddenly produce kind of sanitizer, these alcoholic gels, or an example is IKEA that provides fabrics for influencers to make masks. So you see all these kind of collaborations going on. And there is a great source of inspiration collected by the World Federation of Advertisers. There is a compendium, and people want to be inspired or who just want to see what big brands have been doing. It's really amazing. It's really nice to see. And all these positive actions often overlooked because of we focus on the negative things.
Yeah, another example is the charitable contribution. So we do see ads where, brand X is donating X million dollars or X million products or, free food. A lot of the food companies, for example, are making significant food donations because the unemployment around the world skyrocketed. And so people are going hungry in major cities in the US and in Europe and in other places around the world where at a level that we haven't seen. And so I think marketers, the ethical marketers, it's taking advantage of a moment in time to show their social consciousness. And there is brand awareness and brand building about that, but it's a great thing for the consumers, and it's a real help at a time of crisis.
Certainly. Thank you. I think it's been a really engaging discussion with all of you. I'm going to move over to a few questions that had been sent through by participants beforehand, and then we'll probably take some time to go through questions that are coming through in the chat session. So if any of the participants have questions, please feel free to put them forward in the chat box, and we'll try and address those as feasible depending on our time availability. The first question I'd like to pose to Lucas is related to technology. And the question is, as technology takes over multiple roles, we find that people usually play in the marketing and advertising sector. And what directives should individuals currently active in this space take to stay relevant in the business world?
So that's a very, very interesting question. I think that technology developing will reshape the world we are in today. And this goes even beyond, I think, just marketing and communications, and you always see that as a threat, but I think we need to go with the flow. We need to adapt, and I think that it's actually an opportunity. This is how actually we see it. So number one, as already said in the ICC Code, there are provisions covering, for example, issues of AI. There's issues of responsibility of those who create algorithms. So it means there's already a framework that can be applied to any kind of new technological development. So self-regulation has a role to play in the rules that apply to new technologies. And even issues like AI can be used to screen the ads, because of course more the ads are online, the volumes are increasing, and how do we monitor this? So this is why we are pretty much involved. Our members are involved in using technology to ensure responsible advertising. And I can just mention 2 examples. One of them is avatar monitoring, creations of children avatar that will navigate the web and identify to which ads underage children are exposed to. So this is one type of technology. And the other one is AI to try to identify within the advertisement what ads would be in breach with the codes. So I think the answer would be to embrace technology. This technology can help us moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Lucas. Sibylle, I'll take this next question for you. What kind of claims could be misleading in e-commerce retail in COVID times, given that consumers have been migrating quite significantly to this segment of sale?
Yeah, so in general, obviously, the rules apply to all claims, no matter what the medium is. So no matter how you advertise, where you advertise, be clear, have the evidence, don't mislead. Also make sure of the implied claims, not only the explicit claims you make. And then when it comes to e-commerce and retail, there are several issues that come on top. It could be kind of drip pricing, for example, or if you think of cross-border commerce, it could be the issue of currency. It's very important to be very clear and very transparent here, and consumers really expect it, because that's something they see actually quite quickly, that they're being misled, and then they won't use the site again.
Sure. Thank you very much, Sibylle. Sheila, I'll give the next question to you. How do you see the requirements for the advertising of medical devices during the COVID era?
So I think the FDA has responsibility for drugs, devices, dietary supplements, foods, etc. We see a little bit of blurring of lines. There is guidance from the FDA on general wellness claims. So, if you boost your immune system generally, whether it's a device or a drug or a dietary supplement, it's not a specific drug claim. But if you say using this, air mask at night, or taking this supplement or taking this drug will cure or treat COVID, there's absolutely no medical proof that anything works right now. And so I think from the standpoint of the ethical marketer, you really have to think about the substantiation and both what you're directly saying, your express claims as well as your implied claims, because all of the codes, all of the requirements say that you are responsible, as Lucas said earlier, for consumer perception. And if consumers take a misleading impression away, then that ad is going to be misleading as well. And regardless of whether it's a medical device or not, I don't see that the rules changing regarding general wellness versus specific treatment claims. But from an advertising standpoint, there is that thin red line that Lucas alluded to, where if you're making treatment claims, you need to meet the regulatory requirements. If you're making general wellness claims, and there are ways to structure that, you could be on the right side of the line. It's going to depend on the claims, on your substantiation, and then on what consumers perceive from the ad.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to start taking some of the questions from our chat session. The first one I'll ask, and please feel free to volunteer if any of you would like to take it. Very often in ads, immunity is linked with prevention from COVID-19. Is it incorrect to advertise immunity at this time if it's not linked to COVID?
So let me maybe start with that one. It's fine, at least in the US, to make general claims based on peer-reviewed literature that certain products or vitamins, for example, boost your immune system. There is peer-reviewed data on that. And so that the difference is there is no data that there is anything that's effective against COVID. So again, that line between you can claim that if you take vitamin C, if you do X, if you exercise regularly, eat right, it leads to a healthier lifestyle. It does not treat or prevent COVID. There is no evidence. And so we follow the data in determining what claims you can support in advertising.
Perhaps linked to that same question is another one we've received from Fabiana that says, if there's no mention made to the virus, do you think there's any additional care to be taken when advertising health claims, other than meeting the requirements laid down by law and the ad rules?
You have to look at the substantiation, right? I think Lucas and Sibylle are nodding, so I'll let them chime in.
No, so it's a matter of context as well as the overall look and feel of the ad as well. It's just not only factual elements, it's how it's appreciated in its entirety.
And I think in times of COVID-19, you need to kind of realize that a lot of consumers read everything in this context if it's a health claim. So everyone wants to feel better protected and healthy and have a good immune system. So if you promote these kind of products now, it will be quite likely read in this context. So you need to just be really careful that your claim is substantiated indeed.
The next one is certainly a sensitive one in many countries. It's from Armenia, and it says, in some countries, the names of the disease from COVID-19 is confidential, and in some countries, it's being communicated. Do you have any comments on that?
No, I don't.
Yeah, based in Europe, we haven't come across such a situation.
I mean, not only in terms of advertising, I wouldn't know how to respond unless there is a bit more explanation to the question.
Ray, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. I think that was not specifically related to advertising and probably more linked to sharing information regarding those who have been infected by the virus itself. I'll move on to the next question, which is, don't you think the role of mass media is very important on ethical marketing in the area of COVID?
It's often, of course, both ways. I mean, mass media spreads messages, of course, very quickly, and that's why we call viral ads, because they spread like a virus. So it's quite important. I mean, there has been mass mailing also before, and there has been misleading advertising before. And of course, the internet plays a big role. But on the other hand, the internet also makes that we can remove things quicker. Technology gives us also means to deal with issues quicker. And Lucas was talking about technology and artificial intelligence. And SROs also employ or start to employ this technology by building avatars, by using this technology actually to come up with solutions to find misleading ads quicker. So it's a little bit a both way thing where obviously we need to catch up with technology and also use it.
And we can just maybe refer also to the ICC Code and the responsibility, where the main responsibility lies in the hands of the advertiser, but all of the organizations, companies in the chain itself, in the value chain of delivering the ad, have some level of responsibility commensurate to the role they play in that thing. So in this respect, media are part of the self-regulatory system and contribute to it.
The next question is one from a consumer's perspective. How can we as consumers differentiate between a non-ethical advertisement, I guess, from an ethical one? Lucas, you'd like to take that?
Why not? Indeed, I think first, if you feel offended, if there's something that's wrong, just contact your local SRO. They are experts. There are juries that can actually adjudicate the complaint. But if there's something, just make a claim. I think that's the most important thing, and that's what's in your power to do. If there's a doubt, reach out.
And there is a difference between a legal system and a self-regulatory one. So often in a legal system, you need to go and you need to have the evidence. Why is something misleading? Why is something not okay? Whereas for the self-regulatory system, the consumer doesn't need to have any evidence why something is misleading or not. If he or she believes that an advertisement is misleading or doubts a claim, they can go to the SRO instance for the SRO and for the jury to look at the evidence and assess if the claim is truthful or not. So it's not the consumer's responsibility. And as also I said before, most advertisements are okay. So it's not about really doubting, but if in doubt, don't hesitate to contact the SRO. It's also free for the consumers to complain. It's really easy. As I said, it can be a WhatsApp or filling in a form online.
Good. I think I seem to have addressed many of the questions in the chat session. There was one about how to identify between a right and wrong advertisement, which I think we've probably already addressed. Perhaps in closing, as we only have 4 minutes left before the end of our webinar, would each of the speakers like to give a few words on what are the key takeaways from this webinar, particularly with respect to businesses advertising responsibly and how consumers can respond? Could I ask each of you to share a few last-minute thoughts before we end the webinar?
All right. Then I'll start. Maybe for advertisers, it's really important to think long-term. Consumers are now at home. They watch everything carefully. The way you advertise now can really determine the image of your brand for the years, even sometimes to come. So especially also big brands can really make now big mistakes. And I think everyone should be really careful not to lose consumer trust, also in the interest of everyone and the whole industry.
So first, I'll just mirror what you just said. I think is think for the advertisers, think long term, not short term. And now looking at it right now is whether you're a consumer or an industry player. When in doubt, contact your local self-regulatory organization.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I would just say consult your legal counsel too. In a jurisdiction like the U.S., we didn't talk about this. We are very different than many other places in the world because we like to sue. And so the availability of consumer class actions and is a very active space differentiates the U.S. from other jurisdictions, which makes it extremely important to really play by the rules and make sure that you're both thinking long term. You think about the financial health of your company. You think about what's right for your industry sector, for your business, and all of that starts with what's fair to the consumer. And I think the brands that keep those things in mind are the successful brands in the long run.
Excellent. Unless there are any additional questions, I think we could probably close the webinar. And at this juncture, I would like to thank all of our speakers for their very valuable insight and contributions and for a very engaging discussion on the topic. I'd like to thank all of you who participated today, and we very much look forward to you participating in future webinars of this nature. I know the ICC Academy has at least a webinar every week, so please keep having a look at their website to see if there's anything of interest to you. And Thomas has also included in the chat session a link to the ICC Academy course on ethical marketing and advertising, so please feel free to check it out. Thomas, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much for hosting us for the webinar, and I'll leave you to provide any closing remarks.
No problem. Thank you all. Once again, I just want to echo Ray. Thank all the speakers and also the participants for making the time. I know that everyone's super busy at the moment, but these are really important. And the feedback we've been getting in the chat has been really positive. So I want to really thank you. And once again, do check out the ethical marketing course on the website. As Ray mentioned, the course is completely free, and there's over 35 case studies in there. So, if you really have some extra time now that you're at home and you really want to take a look and sort of stretch your legs on that topic, we recommend you check it out. As a reminder, we are hosting live broadcasts on this topic in addition to other trade topics like the Incoterms rules, cryptocurrency, leadership coaching, and many others. So sign up on our website for free, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. There you'll find all of the previous recordings and all the future recordings that we do with these webinars. So, ladies and gentlemen, this wraps up another episode of the COVID-19 briefing. See you next time. Thank you again.